In this webinar, we'll be taking a tour of objectives-based program evaluation so you can see its relevance to the work we'll be doing. I am Kevin Daberco, a researcher for Word Farmers Associates. The webinar answers 7 key questions. 1. What is objectives-based program evaluation? 2. Who invented it and how did it change across the decades? 3. Who uses it now and for what? 4. How do you organize and conduct it? 5. What are the technical problems? 6. What are the conceptual problems? 7. What are the most important takeaways from this tour? Objectives-based evaluation is the oldest and, in a way, the simplest form of evaluation. The basic thing funders, in particular, want to know is if the program they're funding accomplished what the contractor or grantee said it would. In particular, did it work? Is a typical question that funders hope evaluators will answer. Programs that cost a lot of money are complex efforts. Complex efforts not only embed complexities, they encounter complications. Evaluators, program staff, and funders all realize that complexities and complications are threats to realizing program objectives. But the bottom line for objectives-based evaluation remains fulfillment of objectives. Did they do what they said they would? And did it work? Objectives-based evaluation originates mostly with the work of Ralph Tyler, born in 1902. Tyler began inventing educational objectives in the late 1920s and 1930s because he wanted to improve instruction. Teachers, he knew, needed something to guide their work. This led to an interest in systemic efforts, school-level and district-level programs to improve instruction and curriculum. It was cutting-edge work in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Evaluating programs is a logical extension of evaluating instruction, which itself is a logical extension of gauging student achievement. So across the post-war decades, education thinkers and actors elaborated the objectives-based approach beyond the evaluation of instruction and programs of instructional improvement to the evaluation of all sorts of school and district programs. This work was a much bigger sandbox, and these were the decades in which program evaluation was really invented. It gained momentum mostly after the Second World War. One commonly used model was the discrepancy evaluation model, DEM, developed by Malcolm Prouvost in the mid-1960s. The discrepancy here is the difference between stated objectives and actual outcomes. This model is designed to help funders decide whether to retain a program or to terminate it as a last resort. Achievement of objectives remains the central focus, but the model attends to what happens during implementation. So the DEM model starts to occupy the larger sandbox of program evaluation more fully by taking implementation into account. Programs have processes, and DEM takes processes seriously. If things go wrong in the processes, that situation might have something to do with outcomes, which have something to do with realizing objectives. At this juncture, objectives-based evaluation, with its inherently summative focus, picks up a formative flavor. In other words, as soon as evaluations start to think about processes and how they influence outcomes, it can be used as a way to help program staff improve processes. Another related model was designed by Daniel Stuffbeam, born in 1936. Stuffbeam was a student of Ralph Tyler. By the way, Stuffbeam designed the Evaluation and Research Department of the Columbus City Schools about the time he was inventing his program evaluation model. Again, in the mid-1960s, under the impetus of federally funded programs. CIPP stands for Context, Input, Process, and Product. It's an evaluation system that links program design, which is what Stuffbeam means by context, to outcomes, which is what he means by product. In fact, CIPP is 4 different sorts of evaluation. Context evaluation gives program originators information about the needs the program is positioned to address. A needs assessment focuses on the context in this way. Input evaluation gives program originators and program leaders information about what resources to deploy in pursuit of program objectives. This is still part of the planning program. Process evaluation monitors the deployment of resources during implementation and thus has a formative role. Finally, product evaluation judges how well the program has realized its objectives. It's a summative type of evaluation and therefore has a bearing on decisions about whether or not the program should continue, or expand or be improved. Under CIPP, the decision to modify a program reboots the CIPP cycle. The concept, as Stuffbeam puts it, is simple. What should we do? Context. How should we do it? Inputs. Are we doing it correctly? Process. Did it work? Product. Tyler, Prouvost, and Stuffbeam all understood that, with education programs, there is many a slip between lip and cup. They all acknowledge the importance of process. Note, though, that the bottom line remained the realization of objectives. Did it work? CIPP continues to be used and promoted. Much of the current use takes place in the developing world. Use continues in the U.S. as well, according to very recent reports. CIPP serves, for instance, as a well-beaten model for use in studies of school and district initiatives. Even if some evaluators steer clear of the original Stuffbeam model, did it work remains an important and durable question, and so most program evaluations continue to direct attention and resources to providing an answer. When complex programs have difficult objectives, however, finding a clear-cut answer sometimes proves extremely difficult. Some objectives-based evaluation models focus primarily on outcomes. For example, Fitzpatrick's model looks at the outcomes of training programs in 4 ways. First, it looks at reactions, what participants thought of the training program. Next, it looks at learning, what new knowledge and skills participants acquired. Changes in behavior that reflect new knowledge and skills are the next focus of the model. Finally, the model looks at results, the actual changes in performance that the training hoped to produce. The basic idea of objectives-based program evaluation is rather well described in the DEM model. The objectives lay out a standard, and whatever the progress the program makes toward the objectives in the time allotted by the program represents the outcomes. One measures the difference. It's kind of like a subtraction problem. Although the subtraction problem seems like a simple approach, objectives-based evaluation is not so easy, even in its simplest form. To sketch some of the complexities, we'll look briefly at 2 examples. One is simple and one is complex, but not as complex as programs and program evaluations actually get. Imagine the foreign aid projects of USAID or the large center programs of NSF or IES. Let's say a small district enrolling about 3,000 students has decided to improve parental involvement in a one-year program. The program is designed and resources are allocated. At that point, the district realizes no one on staff can say just how improvement might be determined, and the superintendent thinks it would be good to have an outsider make the judgment. So that's when the evaluator arrives, not at the stage of program planning, but later on. And this situation means that the CIPP context and input parts of the evaluation are already irrelevant. The evaluator might agree to evaluate process, but the small budget doesn't really allow for it. The real task is to compare a baseline level of parental involvement to the level afterward. So the job looks really simple, quite literally a subtraction problem. Details, of course, need careful attention, and the details are easy to mess up, and too often they are messed up in these low-budget efforts, and in large-scale research efforts as well. Here's an off-the-cuff list of questions that get at the details and highlight the complexities. What sort of measurement instruments are available? Which one is best suited to what the district is doing? If no instrument is entirely suitable, can an existing instrument be adapted appropriately? If you make an adaptation, how will you know if the instrument has suitable reliability and validity? How will you collect data? From whom will you collect data? What sample size do you need? In other words, all the usual research details apply, even in a seemingly simple, objectives-based evaluation. Next, let's look at a more complex program and therefore a more complex evaluation. Complex projects involve large budgets, lots of actors, and many, sometimes difficult objectives, often organized under 3 to 5 goals. If the originators of the program are district leaders, as might be the case in a large or mid-sized city, or if the originators are an organization with statewide reach, CIPP is a logical choice for an objectives-based approach. Take this simple example and extend it to all 4 phases of the CIPP model: context, planning evaluation; inputs, resource evaluation; process, implementation evaluation; and product, output evaluation. And then imagine that each evaluation phase keeps in view about 15 objectives organized into 5 goals for, say, a 5-year project. Indeed, CIPP is designed to be cyclical, so the 5 years could each have a complete CIPP cycle. It's too much for a single evaluator. Clearly, such an evaluation requires a team of evaluators and assistants. The complexities of keeping a team on point, clearly focused on the right work at the right time, then are added to the mix, and the focus of the team needs to be sustained for several years in complex programs. Thus, a complex evaluation effort is its own program, with its own programmatic issues related to context, inputs, process, and product. People don't often ask of the evaluation, did it work? All of the evaluation skill sets come into play in such an effort: collecting data, preparing data for analysis and analyzing data, and sharing data with stakeholders, not to mention designing the overall evaluation plan. And every juncture in the evaluation demands the same sort of care and attention needed with the simple example, though the specifics will vary with each set of tasks. The problems of concern within the paradigm of objectives-based evaluation are of 2 sorts: technical, and strategic. Technical problems have already been alluded to. In particular, evaluation judgments of program worth made on the basis of the fulfillment of objectives rely on measurements. Achieving objectives requires objective, usually quantitative measures. One wants, for this purpose, to discover the real effects of programs. Even for simple programs, this is not a simple calculation. Threats to the calculation arise from the fact that giving an instrument once embeds error. Even the best instrument has measurement error. Give an instrument twice and you compound the error. And then there is whether or not the groups measured in the beginning and the end are technically equivalent. That's another kind of error. Indeed, all of the skills for collecting data, preparing data for analysis, and analyzing data bear on this sort of technical problem. Errors in the process of evaluation compound measurement error and sampling error. Again, program evaluation is its own program and it can make its own mistakes during its own implementation. One does not even want to imagine a bad program with a bad evaluation. We are not going there. It's daunting. Despite the technical problems, however, evaluators don't give up. But the good ones get very careful about these things. They disclose problems. They address them well. They advise caution. They make recommendations circumspectly. Technical problems, in short, are manageable. Objectives-oriented evaluation, even CIPP, is a basically summative approach to evaluation. The bottom line is, after all, did it work? A narrowly focused objectives-based evaluation of a complex program elevates did it work to a position it doesn't usually deserve. Other questions are at least as important, especially in complex programs with challenging objectives, where a reasonable perspective is to anticipate that things will, and even must, go wrong at least some of the time. Otherwise, the work would be easy and unworthy of a complex, program-level effort. Narrowly focused objectives-based program evaluation can easily overlook important questions. Here are some of the questions that objectives-based evaluation often overlooks. How did it work? What did staff and participants think of the work and how the work worked? How did staff make decisions? Can the evaluation effort help? What stories do staff and participants have about the program? How do their stories about the program influence the program? Why does the program seem to work in some places and not others? According to participants, what activities do we need to change and why? How has the thinking of program leadership evolved? Why hasn't it evolved? Does the program need different objectives? A different theory of action? Why? In objectives-based models, evaluators remain at a distance from program actors, especially staff and participants. In other words, because the focus on objectives entails strong regard for summative judgments, objectives-based evaluation misses a lot that is directly useful to program leaders, program staff, program participants, and to a funder with a genuine interest in learning about how to engage the difficult aims of the program. Everyone would like to say, it really works. Everyone also knows that claims to that effect are usually premature, and that it really works just indicates a verifiable and usually modest probability. In summary, here are the major takeaways from this webinar. Outcomes-based evaluation seems like common sense, but it's not simple to do it well with a complex program. Complex programs require complex evaluation efforts and effective teamwork, whatever the program evaluation model. Oriented to the fulfillment of objectives, objectives-based evaluation is less oriented to participants and program staff. It strives literally for objectivity. The focus on objectives entails a stronger focus on summative purposes than on formative ones. Attention to resources and processes in the refined models, such as CIPP, does not dislodge the summative focus. Nonetheless, the best objectives-oriented approaches, like CIPP, understand the role of proper planning, proper resourcing, and proper support to the realization of program goals. Objectives-based program evaluation builds directly on insights about the evaluation of instruction and the evaluation of student learning, for example with standardized tests invented in the early 20th century. Growth in some sort of learning is often, but not always, a program objective in education.